My name is Dr. Jenny Vaughan and I'm a neurologist. One of the senior surgeons in my hospital had a patient die after a series of events, and he was entirely blamed and charged with an offence called gross negligence manslaughter. He went to prison in 2013 after he was found guilty and was advised by his lawyers that there weren't any grounds for an appeal. Before this happened, he'd never had any problems. I have no legal qualifications, but I do understand errors in healthcare and how they usually happen. They're almost always the result of lots of small things going wrong. Every step in a process has the potential for failure. The surgeon involved was called David, and I then spent the next 3 years, while still working full-time, working on a criminal appeal with a legal team for him. He had many friends and supporters who helped us raise £50,000 to kick-start the legal case. I've worked as a local councillor as well and been a local health campaigner, and what was amazing about this whole thing was that every skill and contact I built up virtually in the whole of my life came into use. An eye for detail was needed to help the lawyers so they were able to mount an ultimately successful appeal. When his conviction was finally overturned late last year, it was only the second successful appeal in medical manslaughter ever. David was devastated for the family and the patient who died, but also had his own life destroyed by what had happened. After 7 years, he's just gone back to work, but I've now become even more passionate about what the message is for all of us, healthcare workers and patients alike. I'm now busy working with the Department of Health and many other agencies to see if we can try and develop a no-blame culture, such as that in the airline industry. It's important for all of us that we aren't seen to be above the law. Equally, our profession must keep attracting bright, young, dedicated people who want to provide new ways of treating patients, yet still be prepared to ensure the high-risk ones get all their choices. Reducing the costs of litigation will also mean more money can go into frontline care. It's only through ongoing, honest communication of errors, in other words, developing a just culture, that we can truly improve patient safety.
So it was a dehumanizing situation to be in. It really was. There was a lot more happened, but time does not allow me to go into these in any detail. I wasn't allowed books, and the only way my family could get me books was to photocopy pages out of books, so that by the time I got the book, 1 month later, page by page, they were allowed to send three pages at a time. It was about 10 times the cost of the book. I learned Arabic, and I also brushed up on my French while I was in prison. I had visits from my family. My family would travel a round trip of about 6 hours, 3 hours each way, only to see me for about an hour and a quarter or so. And it was a very difficult sort of a meeting. We have 4 children. They couldn't all come at the same time. Only 3 were allowed at any one time, so they had to take it in shifts to come and see me. They'd wait for hours, see me for about an hour or so, and then make the round trip. Interesting encounters in court, in prison. One of the inmates saw me when I was now in an open prison. I had my own cell, and that was really quite something. And things get nicked in prison. Oh, just you turn around and whatever it is you've got in there is gone. So I used to lock my cell every time I came out, and there was some other inmates on the corridor who said, "Now listen, we're really a bit upset with you. You know, we are murderers. We're not burglars. You don't know." You don't have to lock your room every single time you come out. Anyway, eventually I did get out, and a few friends of mine, and one of them is Jenny Vaughan, who's here today, and Ian Franklin sitting over there, and Lord Ribeiro, were all very, very incensed by what I'd been through. And once you knew what the circumstances were that I'd been imprisoned for, I think there was a lot of indignation. They formed what was known as the Friends of David Sellu, and we all lodged an appeal. glad to say we won our appeal. My conviction was overturned, and I don't have time to go into the details of why it was, but the judge clearly, the three senior judges who looked at this case were very critical of the trial judge for not having given adequate directions to the jury. They were also critical of the trial judges for the way that they conducted this trial. I don't have time to go into the details. Of course, a law has now been passed, and that was about 7 years ago, that nobody will now be compensated even if they are wrongly imprisoned. So my career has now been finished, but no compensation, certainly not had any apology from the law. So is this duty of candor merely one that's for doctors? The Crown Prosecution Service decided not to retry me, and as I say, manslaughter is a serious charge. They're not going to let a manslaughterer walk around if they really do have grounds for retrying me, but they somehow said this is no longer in the public interest. Now, if it was in the public interest in 2010, I don't really see what's changed. The coroner decided not to resume the inquest. It means, therefore, that a lot of the problems at this hospital that were highlighted prior to the inquest were now not further investigated, and therefore a lot of the failings at the hospital, and as we all know, a lot of these are hospital-wide problems, often not necessarily things to do with an individual.
So what was the finding? What did the judge have to say about the appeal?
Well, basically, in my view, this case is about scapegoating an individual for multiple system failures and for the decisions of healthcare leaders, and in this case also the actions and decisions of the junior doctor, Hadiza Bawa-Garba's senior consultant. And it was about really disregarding all of those other factors and putting it all on her. And I think what we've seen today is the Court of Appeal has seen through that, and it's commended the initial panel, the MPT panel's approach to the case to actually look at what happened more broadly, all the system failures, the decisions and mistakes of other members of staff, and actually to show some compassion and to actually reverse the decision to get her struck off.
One point that the judge made was the conviction for manslaughter was looking at events in the past, whereas the tribunal was looking at her safety going forward. And what conclusion did the tribunal reach about Dr. Bawa-Garba?
Well, the first thing, they identified that those are very different things. The jury were asked to consider the crime of manslaughter, whereas the MPT were asked to consider her future practice as a doctor, and they saw her unblemished career, they saw her excellent performance before and after the tragic events involving the death of Jack Adcock, and they looked at all the system failures and the failures of other members of staff, and they concluded quite rightly that she shouldn't be struck off. They also acknowledged that as a paediatric doctor she was much needed by society. She was obviously a high performing paediatric doctor in the highest third of her cohort, so a very good paediatric doctor, and they quite rightly identified that the public interest would not be served by striking her off. The big question is, why were medical leaders across the board so slow, taking several years to see this case for what it was?
And it was down to individuals such as yourself and Team Hadiza to crowdfund for this case. So it was down to grassroots doctors in the end to take the lead on this.
Well, yes, I mean, I would like to just say, as part of Team Hadiza, the crowdfunder, we came to this very late. So we were last hour, got involved, but there was a group of grassroots doctors, namely her Dr. Bawa-Garba's former educational supervisor, Dr. Cusack, and Jenny Vaughan. They were just put loads of hours of support and fight into getting us to where we've got to today. And yes, the question applies to them as well. You know, why was it left to them to correct this monumental injustice that is, quite frankly, a disaster for NHS safety and transparency? Why was it left to them and crowdfunding to ensure justice was done? Not just for Dr. Bawa-Garba, but really for the NHS going forward.
Well, it creates a culture of fear. If you speak up, you potentially lose your career, and if you keep your head down and try and do the right thing, you potentially risk being scapegoated. What does this say about our medical regulator, the General Medical Council, which pursued Dr. Bawa-Garba in this way?
Well, it says they lost. The black and white answer is they lost, and they lost so badly they got costs awarded against them. So that just shows an organisation out of control, doesn't it? It shows an organisation not fit for purpose, and it probably shows misconduct.
And in terms of the confidence the public and profession have with the regulator now, what has it done to public confidence?
Well, you'd have to ask the public that, but if I was the public, I'd be very, very concerned. I also think it's the GMC's actions in regard to this case has actually put the Adcock family through a load of unnecessary suffering. Instead of an honest explanation for the death of their child, they've been essentially fed a story about a scapegoat and have been dragged through this legal process that the GMC has actually lost. So I feel nothing but compassion for the Adcocks. They have lost a child, and they should not have been put through this. They should have been given an honest explanation.
Well, I agree, it's shown very poor judgment. Thank you very much for talking to us, and hopefully you'll get some more heist reports and updates. Please share this video, and thank you very much.